Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we are getting into an interesting set of biographies from the companions. And while we're going to cover these four companions, we're going to also cover on the side some of their siblings and others that come up in the story that don't have the deep biographies that we have for them. But this next set of companions that we are covering are called al-Abadila. They are the Abdullahs. And there's a very specific reason for that distinction. So let's talk about this, because if you were to actually number the Abdullahs from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, how many people named Abdullah exist in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ? There are over 300 or 400 of them. So it's not a small number of people. And that is directly tied to the Prophet ﷺ saying, Ahabbul asma'i ilallah, the most beloved of names to Allah are Abdurrahman and Abdullah. So you'll find that there are companions that named multiple kids Abdullah and multiple kids Abdurrahman, but these are the most beloved of names to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of the greatest companions of the Prophet ﷺ are named Abdullah and known by that name Abdullah, or they're known by a kunya, they're known by being Abu something, but at the same time, they are still Abdullah. So let's talk about the Abdullahs. The ones that we will talk about in terms of al-Abadila, when we say the Abdullahs, we're talking about four people. We're talking about Abdullah ibn Abbas, we're talking about Abdullah ibn Umar, we're talking about Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and we're talking about Abdullah ibn Amr. May Allah be pleased with them all. We're talking about them, and of course, they are all the children of some of the most noble companions of the Prophet ﷺ as well. Before we get to that, who is the best Abdullah that is mentioned in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? It's actually Abdullah ibn Uthman. Who is Abdullah ibn Uthman? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So Abu Bakr's actual name is Abdullah ibn Uthman. But his nickname, his kunya is Abu Bakr, and his father's kunya is Abi Quhafa. So his actual name is Abdullah ibn Uthman. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah Azza wa Jalla be pleased with him, and he's certainly the best of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and the best of those who are named Abdullah. Now there's another Abdullah who, if you are reading in the books and you see the name Abdullah in a narration of hadith or in tafsir, without Abdullah ibn anything else, just Abdullah said this, Abdullah said that, that is talking about Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is one of the early companions of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the first people to embrace Islam, and he witnessed the descent of revelation of the Prophet ﷺ, took the revelation fresh from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wants to hear the Quran being recited fresh, غَدًّا طَرِيًّا كَمَا أُنزِلَ, the way that it was revealed, the time that it was revealed, I mean like with the same freshness, listen to the qira'ah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. But he died early, right? So we don't have so much from him, or at least as much from him that is equal to the position that he held in Islam, because he died around the time of Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, preceding the fitna that would take place. He did not live through the civil wars that would take place. He didn't live through the devastating chapters in history. And so because of the time that he passed away, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, we did not get from him. Of course, this is true for so many of the other companions of the Prophet ﷺ. We did not get from him all that we could have got, even though there's so much that's built from his tafsir, from his fiqh, from his understanding, and so much of him, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he holds his weight, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in every single way. May Allah be pleased with him. But when we come to the Abadila, the four that we will cover, why do we look at them as the Abadila? Why are they spoken about as al-Abadila? There are a few different reasons. Number one, they all lived long enough to where they lived through the devastating twists and turns in Islamic history, and they contained, encyclopedias of understanding, of fiqh, of riwayat, of narrations from the Prophet ﷺ that they were able to apply in real time and teach to the next generation in multiple regions. It's really the footprint, if you will, that they leave in the books of Islamic history because of the history that they witnessed and how they were witnessed and interacted with in history. So that's the first thing to mention. The second thing to mention is that each one of them is distinguished in some way. So Ibn Abbas distinguished by his love of the Quran. He is Tarjuman al-Quran, the interpreter of the Quran. Abdullah ibn Umar is distinguished by his love of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, distinguished for his zuhd, for his asceticism. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, distinguished for his courage, right? He became a khalifa, right? He became a leader. He became someone who actually governed in Islamic history and who leads a strong revolt, right, that we will certainly cover when we get to his life. Some said that we never saw a man more knowledgeable than Ibn Abbas, and we never saw a man more pious than Ibn Umar. So these four men, they lived as contemporaries of one another, they interacted with each other, they taught multiple students, and there is so much that's built from them. And they are amongst the companions that we take the most from in any Islamic science. So in any given Islamic science, you have to go through these four men in some regard. Imam al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala also then mentions that they are amongst, or at least some of them are amongst those who gave the most of fatwa. So he divides the companions of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of their iftah, in terms of the level of fatwa that they gave, into a few categories. Keep in mind here, there are tens of thousands of Sahaba, but they weren't all muftis. Only a handful of them were looked at as the muftis amongst the companions themselves. Now, all of them are greater than us, right? But amongst themselves, they had ranks in regards to their knowledge. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he said that the companions from which the fatwa were learned were 30-something between men and women. And he mentions the Sahaba that were most frequent, that had the largest share of fatwa. And he says that they were 7. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Aisha al-Mu'mineen, Zayd ibn Thabit, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Abdullah ibn Umar. Again, he says that the 7 of the companions who were the most in their fatwa were Umar, Ali, Aisha, Zayd ibn Thabit that is, and then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Abdullah ibn Umar. 2 of the Abadila that we will cover, and they'll be the first 2 that we cover, were of the most frequent in terms of fatwa from them. And as Ibn Hazm said, if we were to collect the fatwa given by each of them separately, then that's going to, constitute volumes of books. Just their fatwa. Those 7 that we mentioned, may Allah be pleased with them all. And then he mentioned those who gave fatwa moderately. And he mentions Abu Bakr and Salama and Anas ibn Malik and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abu Huraira, Uthman ibn Affan, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Salman al-Farisi, Jabir ibn Abdullah, and Mu'adh ibn Jabal. So these 13 companions, right, are in a second tier in terms of the amount of fatwa that they gave. Not in terms of rank, because obviously Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was greater than the first 7 that we mentioned, right? But in terms of the amount of fatwa that they actually gave. And then after them, the rest of the companions, right, you'll find a handful of fatwa here or there, a handful of narrations, and it was usually fiqh that was related to a very specific issue that they faced at the time. The last thing that I'll say here, there's the role in hadith narration. They are all hadith narrators and narrated not just from the Prophet ﷺ, but narrated from other companions as well, right? But the last thing that I'll mention is that all 4 of their lives intersected, as we said, with the fitan, with the trials and tribulations, with the politics of the time. And all 4 of them had different approaches, somewhat different approaches to the politics of the time, but all of them based in principle, which is actually incredible because it shows you that there can be diversity that is also principled. There can be principled difference of opinion. None of them were quote-unquote sellouts. None of them were traitors. None of them undermined the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. But all 4 of them dealt with devastating circumstances with slightly different approaches amongst themselves. And there's something so enriching about how they interacted with each other, how they deliberated amongst each other as to how to deal with the turmoil that was then engulfing the ummah of Muhammad ﷺ, where you had war and civil strife and confusion and assassinations and different political autonomies that were existing in the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we can learn so much from all 4 of them. And inshallah ta'ala, I look forward to going on this journey with you in the next section that we do of the first. Again, we'll cover Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, but we'll also sort of branch out and talk about some of his brothers. We'll cover Abdullah ibn Umar, we'll cover Abdullah ibn Zubayr and Abdullah ibn Amr, and in the process, we might break out for some of these shorter sessions But I hope, inshallah ta'ala, this introduction gives you a little bit into what we're going to be covering, and I look forward to being with you on this next set of journeys within the journey of the firsts. Jazakumullahu khairah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.